There is a kind of power that does not need to be seen, that does not need to raise its voice, that does not react to insult, to doubt, to noise. It simply remains. The Stoic philosophy teaches that power is presence, not performance. That true strength is not in what moves you, but in what no longer does. To become unshakable, you must learn to act as if nothing bothers you, not because you are numb, but because you are in control. Control of your thoughts, control of your reactions, control of your emotional world, because the man who can stay calm when the world is loud is the man the world cannot move. When someone criticizes you and you stay composed, you do not lose. You win. Silently. Completely. You remove their power without saying a word. You show without showing off that your peace is not on the table, that your self-worth was never for sale. Most people live as slaves to their emotions. Every word triggers them. Every opinion disturbs them. Every setback breaks them. But the Stoic remains still. He knows that what is external has no right to govern what is internal unless he allows it, and so he no longer allows it. This is not detachment in the sense of coldness. It is detachment in the sense of clarity. The world is what it is, but I am who I choose to be. That is the Stoic mindset. Imagine a life where your inner world is yours again, not shaped by the opinions of strangers, not shaken by temporary frustration, not destroyed by a few harsh words, but governed by calm, by rhythm, by reason. This is not just possible. It is necessary, because a man who reacts to everything is pulled from everything, and a man who is pulled from everything can build nothing. So you train, you pause before reacting, you breathe instead of bursting, you respond instead of erupting, and every time you do, you are not just avoiding conflict, you are building a fortress, not a wall. A fortress, a mind that is not swayed by circumstances, a presence that speaks louder than defense ever could. The Stoic does not need to argue. His calm is the loudest statement in the room. He does not need to retaliate. His discipline is the answer. You do not win by fighting every fight. You win by choosing which battles deserve your energy, and most deserve none. Let them talk. Let them assume. Let them provoke. You remain, not because you are passive, but because you are powerful. And that power is rare. It is why when you walk through the storm without flinching, the world notices, not because you shouted, but because you didn't. This is the strength you are building, and when you have it, you no longer need to defend it, because no one can take what you refuse to give away. You are not your emotions. You are the one who observes them, and the one who can observe without being controlled has already won half the battle. The Stoic philosophy teaches that it is not the event that disturbs you, but your judgment of it, and if your judgment changes, the entire experience transforms. Most people carry the weight of things that never even happened. They react not to reality but to fear, to projections, to assumptions. They imagine insult where there was silence. They imagine betrayal where there was only distance, and so their suffering is not from the world but from within. You must free yourself from this. You must train your mind to interpret with clarity, not emotion. When someone delays, it does not mean disrespect. When someone disagrees, it does not mean disloyalty. When something is lost, it does not mean all is lost. The Stoic watches carefully how his own mind reacts, and when it begins to twist, to spiral, to imagine, he steps back. He does not feed it. He does not follow it. He simply sees it. That distance between stimulus and response is where freedom lives, and that freedom is the foundation of all calm. These two, man who can pause before reacting holds more power than the man who dominates a room. Because self-command is the beginning of all external influence. You cannot lead if you are led by your triggers. You cannot build if you destroy at every challenge. So you train your stillness not once, but daily. You make it a ritual, not avoidance, but mastery. You wake in silence not to escape, but to return. Return to the core of who you are beneath all noise. You remind yourself, I am not what happens to me. I am what I choose to become in response. And from this place you walk. You walk into difficult conversations without defensiveness. You walk into uncertainty without panic. You walk into life without needing everything to go your way. Because your way is not based on outcome. It is based on alignment. You hold your posture when others fold. You maintain your pace when others sprint in fear. You keep your tone when others shout. And the world begins to feel your presence. Not loud, but unmistakable. Because calm is a rare language now. It cuts through confusion like a blade of truth. And when you speak after being silent, people listen. Not because you dominate, but because you carry something they lost. Control of self, of thought, of energy. And that is the rarest form of power. To act as if nothing bothers you is not to suppress but to master. You still feel, but you are not swayed. You still care, but you are not consumed. You still walk, but you are not rushed. This is the way, the Stoic way. To act as if nothing bothers you is not indifference. It is the expression of a mind that has been trained to separate what matters from what merely distracts. Most people are not exhausted because of what they carry. They are exhausted because of what they carry unnecessarily. Opinions they never asked for. Judgments they never deserved. Emotions they never processed. Noise they never filtered. The Stoic philosophy teaches that freedom begins the moment you choose not to carry what was never yours. You were not born to absorb everything. You were born to discern, to choose where your energy goes, to decide which words you let in, to filter which thoughts become actions and which are allowed to pass like clouds in a sky you do not chase. That is mastery. The untrained man reacts. He flinches. He panics. He personalizes everything. But the trained man pauses. He breathes. He reflects. He redirects. He understands that not every voice deserves a reply. Not every moment requires an opinion. Not every insult demands a defense. Because to be moved by everything is to be owned by everything, and he refuses to be owned. Instead, he chooses stillness. Stillness is not a lack of motion. It is a lack of friction. The friction of inner conflict, of unresolved thought, of misaligned reaction. Stillness is presence without noise. It is the moment you stop fighting the world and begin mastering yourself. You become the observer of your own triggers. You notice when your breath shortens. You become aware when your shoulders tighten. And instead of reacting, you breathe deeper. You sit taller. You speak slower. This is not weakness. This is power. Because anyone can react. But only the trained can remain. To remain is not to suppress. It is to choose consciously how you wish to respond based on your values, not your impulses. And this is where your strength begins. Because when you stop reacting to what does not matter, you finally create space for what does. Space for clarity, space for peace, space for intention. You begin to live not in reaction to others, but in response to your own truth. And your truth is not shaped by how others treat you. It is shaped by how you treat your own inner world. You are no longer a mirror, reflecting chaos. You are a lighthouse rooted unmoved, guiding quietly by example, not argument. This is how the Stoic moves, without explanation, without defense, without resentment. He simply continues, because nothing has the right to interrupt the peace he has built deliberately. And if something does disturb him, he does not panic. He studies it. He listens. He learns. Because disturbance is not always the enemy. Sometimes it is the teacher. It shows you where your mind still clings, where your values are not yet protected, where your discipline still has room to grow. And when you see it that way, you stop fearing discomfort. You begin using it. You act as if nothing bothers you, because even if something does, you know how to meet it without losing yourself in it. This is the difference between pretending to be strong and truly becoming strong. One resists everything. The other absorbs, understands, transforms. And the world begins to sense the difference. You do not flinch. You do not fight everything. You choose. And that choice is power. There is a moment in every man's life when he must decide what governs him. Is it his emotions or his principles? His reactions or his responsibilities? The chaos around him or the clarity within? The Stoic philosophy teaches that the strongest man is not the one who never feels, but the one who feels and chooses discipline anyway. You can be angry and remain calm. You can be hurt and remain kind. You can be confused and still walk with structure. Because strength is not the absence of inner conflict. It is the quiet ability to hold it without being controlled by it. To act as if nothing bothers you is not to become cold. It is to become so deeply grounded that your peace no longer depends on the behavior of others. You do not let someone's chaos become your compass. You do not let someone's words rewrite your identity. You do not let the external world undo the inner work you've already done. Because you have trained in silence, in repetition, in the discipline of staying still when everything tells you to move. You are no longer here to win arguments. You are here to win back yourself. That means you walk away not in weakness but in wisdom. You don't need to prove your point when your life proves it louder. You don't need to respond to every insult when your presence already speaks volumes. Because a man who is triggered by everything is no longer in command. And the Stoic is always in command. He is not arrogant. He is aligned. He does not dominate others. He dominates self. This is not something you perform once. It is something you return to every day, every moment. Because life will always test your stillness. It will place people before you who misunderstand you, who question you, who mock your silence. But you are not here to react. You are here to remain. Not to defend, but to demonstrate. Not to shout, but to show. Not to prove, but to be. This is why stillness is so powerful. It cannot be faked. It must be lived. And when it is real, others will feel it. They may not understand it, but they will feel it. They will sense that you are no longer moved by the same things that move them. And in that silence, there is gravity. The kind of gravity that draws in respect without ever asking for it. The kind of gravity that causes even your enemies to pause, because they realize you are no longer on the same level of reaction. You are not playing the same game. You are living by something higher, something quieter, something more deliberate. And that is what makes you powerful. You are not pretending. You are practicing. Practicing stillness. Practicing detachment. Practicing the choice to stay in alignment when the world tries to pull you away from it. This is the training. This is the path. And with every step you become less reactive and more real. Less shaken and more rooted. Less controlled and more in control. This is how you act as if nothing bothers you. Not because nothing touches you, but because nothing owns you. To act as if nothing bothers you does not mean you do not care. It means you care deeply about the right things. The Stoic philosophy is not the art of avoidance. It is the discipline of discernment. To know the difference between what deserves your energy and what only drains it. Between what is truly a problem and what is simply noise. Between what is urgent and what is important. The untrained mind responds to everything. Every message, every mood, every opinion. But the trained mind chooses. It is not cold. It is clear. Clarity is a kind of kindness. Kindness to yourself and to your purpose. Because when you let every little thing bother you, you lose yourself in the smallness of it all. You begin to shrink your spirit to fit someone else's drama. You begin to hand your peace to people who never earned it, and soon you forget who you were before the world started tugging at your attention. But the Stoic remembers. He returns again and again to stillness. Not because he has no enemies, but because he refuses to become one to himself. You must protect your peace like it is sacred, because it is. You must protect your values with quiet conviction, not by forcing others to agree, but by never betraying them, even when it would be easier to do so. When someone mocks you, you don't need to respond. Let them speak. When someone misjudges you, you don't need to explain. Let them think. When someone challenges you, you don't need to escalate. Let them shout. You remain, because your energy was not made for every battle. And the man who is ready for everything is often prepared for nothing. So choose your battles as you would choose your words, with patience, with principle, with restraint. Restraint is not weakness. It is the evidence of mastery. It is what separates the wise from the reckless, the grounded from the reactive, and the calm from the chaotic. This world will give you endless chances to prove how loud you can be, to prove how sharp your tongue is, to prove how easily you can strike back. But real strength is when you do not take those chances, when you leave the invitation unanswered, and instead walk deeper into your alignment. The Stoic walks this way, not because he does not feel, but because he chooses what to feed and what to let pass. Every reaction is a choice, and every choice becomes a vote for the man you are becoming. So let others be loud. You be clear. Let others chase attention. You cultivate presence. Let others burn energy, proving they are right. You stay focused on being true. Because in the end, it's not about proving anything. It's about building something. Something that can last. Something that can hold. Something that can carry you through all seasons. And that something is your inner stillness. It's the thing they can't touch no matter how loud they get. Because you have learned to carry it with you like breath, like rhythm, like quiet armor. This is what it means to act as if nothing bothers you. Stillness is not the absence of conflict. It is the ability to move through it without losing your shape. You will be tested, not once, but constantly. Tested by delays, by misunderstanding, by the temptation to react when silence would serve better. This is the real training. To remain steady not when it is easy, but when it is personal. When someone cuts you with words. When a door closes unfairly. When you are looked over despite your effort. When you are blamed for what you did not cause. The untrained man explodes, or he collapses. But the man of Stoic philosophy absorbs, assesses, and adjusts, not to protect an image, but to preserve his core. To act as if nothing bothers you is not to become numb, but to become rooted. So deeply rooted that even when the wind roars, you bend but do not break. You speak calmly not because the fire is gone, but because you have learned not to let it burn your future. You remain silent, not because you are afraid, but because you value your energy too much to waste it on people who do not listen. You walk away not because you lost, but because you are no longer willing to pay the price of being right in a place that costs you your peace. This is not ego. It is evolution. You have learned what matters. And when you know what matters, you stop giving weight to what does not. Your mind becomes lighter. Your days become clearer. Your soul becomes still. This is not a performance. It is a practice. A way of being that grows stronger every time you choose stillness over ego, discipline over drama, intention over impulse. You no longer chase justice in every conversation. You let the world think what it will, because you know that truth does not need defense when your life already lives it. That's where the Stoic finds freedom, not in getting even, but in rising above, not in showing force, but in showing restraint, not in controlling others, but in commanding himself. And that self-command is what builds momentum. Because now you are not pulled by your mood. You are not owned by your triggers. You are no longer reactive to the waves of the world. You move on your own terms, with your own rhythm, by your own compass. This is what the world notices. Not your words, but your weight. Not your style, but your substance. Not your reaction, but your refusal to be moved by things beneath you. Not because you are above them, but because you have gone within yourself so deeply that nothing external can reach that far anymore. That depth is where your strength lives now, and from that depth you act as if nothing bothers you, because truly nothing owns you. You no longer react. You no longer flinch. You no longer hand over your peace to people who have not earned your attention. This is what happens when you stop living from the outside in and begin living from the inside out. The Stoic philosophy teaches us that nothing disturbs a man unless he allows it inside. And once you stop opening the door to every little offense, you begin to see how small those offenses really were. What once made you spiral now makes you smile. What once consumed your thoughts now passes through like wind through a tree you no longer need to chase. Because strength is not found in resistance. It is found in relaxation and composure, in the ability to observe without becoming entangled. This is not suppression. It is sovereignty. Sovereignty over your focus. Sovereignty over your nervous system. Sovereignty over your path. You begin to realize that silence is not a void. It is a sanctuary, and when you stop filling every space with reaction, you begin to fill your life with wisdom. You pause not out of fear but out of clarity, because not everything needs a response. Not every challenge deserves your fire. Not every voice was meant to be answered. When you act as if nothing bothers you, you are not lying. You are choosing. Choosing what enters your world. Choosing what touches your inner state. Choosing what deserves a place in the sacred economy of your time and your energy. That is where the real shift happens. When your energy becomes expensive and you no longer give it to the cheap things. You no longer chase closure. You no longer seek to explain yourself. You no longer argue to prove your worth. Because you have remembered that your worth was never up for debate. It is not confirmed by applause. It is not revoked by rejection. It is not altered by someone else's inability to see you clearly. You see yourself clearly now, and that is enough. You are no longer trying to be everything for everyone. You are focused on being everything to your principles. This is the Stoic's path. Not to please, but to remain. Not to impress, but to embody. Not to react, but to refine. Your presence becomes your power. Because you don't need to dominate. You just don't need to be disturbed. That refusal to be pulled is what makes you magnetic. Because the world is noisy. And when you are not, you stand out without trying. You become the one they look to. Not because you speak the loudest, but because your silence is no longer empty. It is full. Full of experience. Full of discernment. Full of someone who has walked through fire and no longer needs to prove he made it out alive. The Stoic does not pretend to be untouchable. He has simply learned where not to place his hand. He does not numb his feelings, he understands them. And because he understands them, he does not let them lead. That's what separates him. Not what he feels, but what he follows. Because feeling is natural. But following feeling without thought, without pause, without purpose leads you back to chaos. And you have left chaos behind. Not because you hated it, but because you outgrew it. You no longer need chaos to feel alive. Now you feel most alive in calm, in clarity, in control. This is not perfection. This is maturity. The kind of maturity that cannot be faked, because it shows up not in what you say, but in what you ignore. And the longer you live like this, the more you realize that your greatest victories will come in the moments when you choose not to fight because you no longer need to. You've already won. Not the battle, but yourself. And when you have won yourself, there is nothing else left to chase. Only peace to protect. The day you realize you don't have to react to everything is the day your life begins to feel like your own again. You reclaim your time. You reclaim your attention. You reclaim your peace. The Stoic philosophy reminds us that no external storm has the power to shake the man who has learned to command his inner world. You are not what happens to you. You are how you respond. You are not the insult. You are the silence that follows it. You are not the chaos. You are the breath that slows through it. And you are not the noise. You are the space between the noise where stillness lives. You do not need to be cold to remain calm. You do not need to be indifferent to be unmoved. You simply need to be clear. Clear about what you serve. Clear about what deserves you. Clear about who you are and who you will no longer become just to satisfy emotion in the moment, because that's where most people fall. Not in failure, but in impulse. In the instant reaction that tears down what they've spent years building. In the heated word that costs them trust. in the careless moment that costs them peace. But you have trained otherwise. You are no longer here to be right. You are here to be rooted in practice, rooted in principle, rooted in a standard that no one else needs to understand because you live it with or without validation. You no longer fear silence. You use it. You no longer avoid discomfort. You examine it. You no longer resist pain. You learn from it. This is not detachment. This is refinement. The Stoic does not walk away from life. He walks through it differently. He does not need to win the argument when he has already won the self. And you have started to understand this. You see now that the world will always invite you into reaction. It will send you opinions designed to poke your pride, people who try to unseat your dignity, moments that test the edge of your patience, and every time you will be given a choice, to defend or to demonstrate, to fight or to stay firm, to speak or to breathe. And that choice defines everything. When you choose stillness, you give nothing away. Not your energy, not your focus, not your direction. You keep walking, with quiet resolve, with a heart that no longer flinches every time something challenges your comfort, because discomfort is no longer your enemy. It is your refinement. You see now that every insult is an invitation to go lower, and every moment of discipline is a step in becoming unshakable. You no longer serve your feelings. You acknowledge them, then act from principle. You no longer seek control over others. You command yourself. You no longer explain your silence, you embody it. This is the man you are becoming. Not because you stopped caring, but because you started caring about the right things, about your clarity, your core, your character. You do not pretend to be unaffected. You have simply outgrown the need to show every wound. You tend to your wounds in stillness. You sharpen your thinking in silence. You protect your dignity with discretion, and you realize that dignity is the most powerful form of protest, because it says, I will not meet you in the mud. I will remain where I am because I have spent too long getting here to throw it away for a moment. This is the life of the Stoic, unmoved by noise, unshaken by provocation, not because he does not feel, but because he has chosen what gets to touch him, and that choice has set him free. You are no longer in a hurry to react. You have slowed your breath. You have strengthened your center. And now you begin to understand what real control feels like. It is not the power to force outcomes. It is the ability to remain untouched by outcomes that were never yours to control. This is the essence of Stoic philosophy. Not the absence of motion, but the presence of meaning in every motion you choose. Because when you act from stillness, everything changes. You begin to make decisions, not to escape discomfort, but to remain in alignment. You begin to speak, not to be heard, but because your words match your principles. You begin to work not to prove anything, but because contribution is now a part of your identity. And most of all, you begin to respond not with reflex, but with responsibility. Responsibility over your thoughts, over your energy, over your role in the moment that unfolds. To act as if nothing bothers you is not apathy. It is authority, not over others, but over your own internal state. It means I will not be dragged into the chaos you offer me, because I have spent years building something stronger inside myself. And that space is no longer open to every disturbance that knocks on the door. You still feel, but you filter. You still hear, but you choose what to keep. You still see, but you decide what deserves a response. This is maturity, and maturity cannot be imitated. It shows up not in what you say, but in what you no longer say. It reveals itself in the pauses, in the ability to delay, to step back, to observe before you enter, and sometimes not to enter at all. Because the strongest position is not always forward. Sometimes it is still. Stillness is not inaction. It is intentional restraint. It is the space where wisdom breathes. It is what allows you to stop adding fire to flames that were never yours to extinguish. You are not responsible for every room you walk into. You are responsible for the state you bring with you. And when that state is calm, even chaos begins to hesitate. Because people feel it, that you are not performative, that you are not reactive, that you are not trying to be anything except honest with yourself. And that honesty radiates in silence. You are no longer trying to manage perception. You are managing energy. You protect what you feed yourself, not just with food, but with words, with thoughts, with images, with conversations. Because your mind is no longer a landfill for other people's problems. It is a sanctuary for your principles. The man who lives this way attracts trust without needing to demand it, because he has become trustworthy to himself. He does what he says he will do. He shows up with or without recognition. He remains anchored even when the tide rises. And when the storm comes, he is not surprised. He has been preparing through every small decision to stay composed. This is not about pride. It is about peace. And peace is more valuable than validation. The more you embody stillness, the less you need to defend yourself. Because the results will speak louder than your explanations ever could. You do not act to impress. You act to remain whole. And in that wholeness, you no longer seek what used to distract you. You have outgrown the need to be understood in every conversation. You have outgrown the need to win in every debate. Because you now know what real victory feels like. It feels like walking away with your values intact. It feels like protecting your energy without guilt. It feels like choosing stillness over noise even when your pride wants to speak. This is what it means to act as if nothing bothers you, not because you do not care, but because what you care about is now deeper, quieter, and unshakable. You now understand that composure is not an accident. It is a craft, built slowly with each decision not to respond the way you used to. The Stoic philosophy does not require you to feel nothing. It requires you to be greater than what you feel. 2. Rise above the emotion not by ignoring it but by honoring it without obeying it. Because obeying your emotions blindly leads you to chaos, and you have chosen clarity. You begin to realize that every emotional trigger is an opportunity, not to lash out but to look within, to ask yourself, why does this touch me? Where is the weakness this reveals? What expectation am I still clinging to that makes this moment feel like an offense? The untrained mind says, that person made me angry. The trained mind says, something within me was still fragile enough to be moved. That's the work now. Not in fixing others, but in reinforcing yourself. You no longer take offense because you have chosen to stop carrying the weight of what others do. You carry your own code. You follow your own law. Not the law of impulse, but the law of principle. Your energy is now too valuable to be spent on arguments that do not build anything. Your focus is now too sharp to be diffused by noise. Your peace is now too deep to be stirred by surface-level chaos. This doesn't mean you avoid confrontation. It means you walk into it differently, with clarity, with stillness, with a willingness to stand without raising your voice. Because sometimes the strongest statement you make is the tone you refuse to match. You're no longer drawn in by people who want a reaction. You see it now, the bait, the performance, the projection. And you walk around it as you would a puddle, not because you are afraid, but because you are clean. You do not need to win every conversation. You need to win every moment where you had the option to fold, but chose to remain still. That is your success now. Not applause, not dominance, but sovereignty. The Stoic does not pretend to be above emotion. He simply chooses not to be enslaved by it. He trains himself in silence so that when the pressure comes, his responses are not guesses, but habits. You are now building those habits. Every breath you take instead of speaking out of anger. Every step you take away from the noise. Every time you listen instead of interrupting. These are not small things. They are the foundation of an unshakable life. Because the man who acts from discipline is no longer moved by disorder. He builds peace in himself and then walks with it into rooms that don't know what peace feels like. And suddenly they listen. Not because you demand it, but because your presence is too strong to ignore. You carry something they forgot how to build, something they didn't know they missed. A kind of stillness that doesn't collapse under pressure and doesn't react to pressure because it has already transcended the need to be liked, to be understood, to be defended. This is your power now, not in reaction, but in restraint. not in performance but in presence, not in shouting but in standing. And you stand not to prove. You stand because this is what you are now. A man of rhythm, of discipline, of quiet fire, unshaken, unrushed, unmoved, because you have learned to act as if nothing bothers you, not because you are pretending, but because you have become the kind of man who cannot be touched by the trivial, by the petty, by the small. You are no longer reachable by anything less than truth. You are not cold. You are controlled. You are not distant. You are discerning. And most of all, you are not disconnected. You are deeply aligned to something greater than how you feel in the moment. This is what sets you apart. The Stoic philosophy teaches that the man who acts from emotion is a puppet to everything around him. But the man who acts from clarity, from discipline, from principle, he becomes free. Free from what others say, free from how others behave, free from the chains of needing to be liked, understood, praised, invited. You walk your own road now. Not in rebellion, but in resolve. You no longer speak to fill silence. You speak because your words mean something. You no longer react to seek control. You respond because control already lives inside you. This is how you become the man who does not flinch. Not because he feels nothing, but because he has trained his nervous system to follow his values, not his fear. That training is daily, hourly, moment by moment. Each time you breathe instead of breaking. Each time you reflect instead of retaliating. Each time you stay instead of running. You are building something rare, something real, and others may not see it. They may say you have changed, that you're too calm, too quiet, too distant. But what they're really saying is that they can no longer pull you into the places they used to. And that is a sign of growth. You do not need to explain this growth. You do not need to defend it. You just keep living it. Because the life you live now is no longer built for performance, it is built for peace. You work differently, with intention, without urgency. Because your worth is no longer tied to how much you do, but to how well you remain yourself in everything you do. You rest differently, without guilt, without racing thoughts. Because rest is no longer escape. It is rhythm. You relate differently. You no longer seek to be everything to everyone. You are at ease with being solid to a few. And those few will know your value not by what you say, but by how deeply you listen, by how lightly you carry drama, by how firmly you stand in what you believe, even when no one else agrees. This is what quiet power looks like. It doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't need to be loud. It just is. And because it is, the world shifts around it. The unshakable man does not bend to chaos. He becomes the shape that others begin to notice. Not because he demands it, but because gravity cannot be ignored. You are now that gravity. Not because of control, but because of command. Command over your state. Command over your words. Command over your choices. And from that command comes influence. Not influence built on manipulation, but on consistency. Because in a world of performers, you are no longer acting. You are simply becoming. Becoming the kind of man who does not react, because he has nothing to prove. The kind of man who does not argue because he has nothing to hide. The kind of man who does not chase because he has nothing to lose when he walks in truth. This is what it means to live by Stoic philosophy. To hold yourself in the face of everything that used to unmake you. To carry your calm into the chaos without needing anyone to understand how you got there. Because you know you built it one breath at a time. You no longer need the world to give you peace. Because you've built it within yourself. Brick by brick. Breathe by breath. Choice by choice. And now you carry it wherever you go. It's not something people can take. It's not something people can damage. Because it no longer comes from outside. This is the final stage of composure. Not the suppression of feeling, not the denial of humanity, but the quiet truth that you do not need to fight for what you already are. The Stoic philosophy is not about escape. It is about return. Return to stillness, return to your principles. Return to the version of you that no longer needs to be seen to be powerful. You can walk into a room and say nothing, and still shift the energy. Because what you bring is not noise but presence. You have become a man of substance, not because you chased it, but because you stopped chasing everything else. And this presence was born in the fire. It was born in every moment you stayed when it would have been easier to react. In every time you walked away, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom. It was built in stillness, in sacrifice, in hours where no one clapped and no one noticed except the man you looked at in the mirror. That man no longer flinches. Not because he is numb, but because he has chosen to feel deeply without surrendering to emotion. He does not live on impulse. He lives on alignment. He speaks when words are needed and remains silent when they are not. He acts when it is time, and he rests when it is earned. He does not chase applause because he has tasted the deeper satisfaction of internal integrity. You are now that man. You no longer look for strength in the noise. You find it in the rhythm you keep when no one is watching, and from that rhythm you build your life, one that cannot be shaken by others' moods, by shifting trends, by temporary storms. You do not lose your calm because someone else lost theirs. You do not lower your voice to match their chaos. You stay present, disciplined, deliberate. You are no longer reaction. You are response. You are presence. You are posture. That is what makes you different now, and they may not understand it. That you walk slower because you walk with awareness. That you speak less because you speak with weight. That you defend nothing because your life already proves everything. This is not performance. This is peace. And peace was never loud. It was built in every moment you chose not to abandon yourself, just to win what was never worth holding. You have learned to act as if nothing bothers you because now nothing breaks the bond you've built within. You are steady, and because of that, you are free. Free to let the world be what it is. Free to lead by example, not explanation. Free to hold your line while others chase approval. This is the way of the Stoic, and now it is your way too.